my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Christian Moore, the author of the book that you all have a copy of right now, The Resilience Breakthrough. A little bit about Christian. Christian is the founder of what's called the Why Try program that helps individuals to develop resilience. The reason why we brought him here is because we felt like the message that he has to share is very, very relevant to what we're trying to do in current enrollment, to help kids to learn how to navigate the college experience so that when they come over here, they are able to persist to the completion of a degree and walk away and end up in meaningful employment and makes a difference in their lives. So Christian founded the Why Try program. It is used by 25,000 schools and organizations. This is not some little small endeavor. This is a major organization that has served 3 million students. 3 million students have been through the program. That's 3 million students in all 50 states. Another thing is that Why Try and Christian are based out of Utah, so it's a local, Utah local. And then the last thing that I'll mention about it, and this is kind of cool, is that Christian basically went from special ed to speaking at the White House. He was invited into the Obama administration to speak at a White House convening. So that's Christian Moore. With that said, I'm going to turn the time over to him and let him talk to us a little bit about resilience.
Thank you, sir. All right. It's great to be here in my home state right now speaking. I spent half my time going to the Salt Lake airport, flying out, and I drive by here constantly, and I'm like, man, I think my first time ever speaking at this college, here at the community college here at Salt Lake. So I'm excited to be here. My number one rule as a speaker is if anybody here has a phone, you can take your phone out and you can literally turn it to the on position. I kid you not. You can turn your cell phone on. You can talk to the person next to you. You can disrupt. You can make all the noise you want. I primarily work with students with severe learning disabilities and behavioral disorders, so I'm not used to people listening to me. So if you quietly sit and listen, I'll get really, really nervous. So I promise you, this is one workshop you can be highly, highly dysfunctional and love dysfunction. It doesn't matter how much I speak, I'm just usually a little bit nervous for the first few minutes. So I'd like to share my most embarrassing experience in life because I'm not nervous once I share my most embarrassing experience. It happened in the first 2 years of my life. When I was born, my mom thought I was the cutest baby boy that she'd ever seen. I know that might seem funny looking at me now. Any moms or dads here? All right, raise your hand if your child's the cutest child in the whole world. All right, my mom was under the same delusional belief. If you ask my wife, Wendy, she'd tell you I was the cutest baby in the whole world. But my mom was so extreme with it, she decided to enter me in a contest that covered all of LA County, all the way down to San Diego. She told all her friends, all her girlfriends, Christian will win first place, hands down, for sure, guaranteed. Oh. Is that like a first place winner of a baby contest? Well, thanks for the awe. Wow, those are very nice awes. They only my homes get the awes. If you're a little boy with curly hair, what do most moms kind of do? They let it grow out. I had this long, long curly hair. And luckily for me, the day of the contest, my mom was too ill to take me. But she knew I needed to go. So she decided to have her brother, my uncle, take me. He's kind of a comedian. And I have a sister who's about a year and a half older than me. He decides to put a pink ribbon in my hair. He puts me in my sister's pink dress. And I win first place as the cutest baby girl in all of Southern California. So when you start out life like that, you got to learn resilience really, really early in life. So I went from that failure to many, many, many more failures. I get the opportunity to speak for the complete opposite. The reason usually someone speaks because they've accomplished something or they've had some type of success or something. I speak for the complete opposite reasons. I kid you not. I'm one of the world-renowned leading experts on what I call the 2 F's, fear and failure. I attended the University of Adversity. So to tell you just a few of my failures and some of the challenges I had growing up. I grew up in between D.C. and Baltimore. Spent quite a bit of time there before I moved here to Utah. But my mom got married really, really young, had me and an older sister. And then my mom got a divorce. She met a man who had 6 kids. whose wife had just left him with 6 kids and never came back. Now I'm a psychotherapist. I realize that might have been a hint to my mom. But they get married and have 4 more kids. Anybody catch the total of that? Yeah, 5 brothers, 6 sisters. I'm the 8th child. My mom was just a little bit overwhelmed with these 12 kids. My mom has something called social phobia, generalized anxiety disorder. My mom had a fear of leaving the house. You have to leave the house to go get food. So there wasn't a lot of food to eat in my house growing up. There's usually pickles, olives, and tuna fish. I'm going to write a cookbook one day, 101 ways how to eat those 3 things. Next person to tell you a little bit about is my dad. He's not my biological dad, or I'd have a higher IQ. We know learning disabilities are very genetic. A couple years ago, I was showing my wife the genetics to learning disabilities. It wasn't that big of a deal until we started reproducing. And so she started spending a couple hours every day reading to my 2 boys, Cooper and Carson. Now, I was illiterate when I was 17 years old, so I was like, Wendy, you can put the books away. We got 17 years before they're going to learn how to read. And she didn't really find that funny either, if you found that a little funny. But anyway, so my dad, he graduates 2 years early. They're in Arlington, Virginia, goes to work for the U.S. Postal Service sorting mail. And the U.S. Postal Service can tell he has a tremendous talent. You could say to him 5,898 times 10,852, and he could instantly rattle that off the top of his head. Has anybody here ever seen the movie Rain Man or Beautiful Mind? Especially ever seen the movie Beautiful Mind. You've met my dad. On my dad's 18th birthday, 2 gentlemen pull up in front of the U.S. Postal Service and drive him to a place called Fort Meade, Maryland. Anybody know what's on Fort Meade, Maryland? There's a place called NSA, the National Security Agency. And my dad becomes a GS-16 code breaker. That's the highest level cryptanalyst, the highest level spy you can become. I'm going to write a book one day, Son of Spy. But I don't know if you've ever been around a genius before. They usually lack 2 things: common sense and social skills. Now I realize my dad's autistic. So I have an autistic dad who's a code breaker at NSA. Everybody catch this? A mom with social phobia and generalized anxiety disorder. As a child, I'm diagnosed with ADHD. Anybody picked up on it yet? ADHD, conduct disorder, and severe learning disabilities. And we're under one roof of a house with 11 other siblings with similar issues. How important do you think reading, writing, and arithmetic was to me? Not real important. Some school years, I missed over 100 days of school. I was sure I was going to make it in the NBA, but because of my top physical condition, I didn't make it to the NBA, so I had to fall back on this speaking crap. In my neighborhood, most kids my age had to go in the house pretty early, usually by 6 o'clock at night. So I'd run around with the older kids. Because of my parents' mental health issues, I was a street kid. I could stay out till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on a school night. The older kids, again, they quickly introduced me to this urban pharmaceutical world. They would put all the drugs on me because they knew what? Yeah, I was likely not going to be the one lady yells it out. So they were like, look, Christian, if you use drugs, we'll kill you. If anybody messes with you, we'll kill them. I was the safest child in America. I know that sounds really at risk because I had a tremendous value to them. So they put all the drugs on me. The police would roll up. I was the diversion. I'd run over and talk to the police, and the police would hand me Washington Redskin football cards and take me home. The police never, ever checked me. So by the time I was 7 years old, everybody catch that age? 7 years old, I became highly, highly aware of social injustice in the United States. It's definitely what inspired me to become a social worker and do some of the work I'm doing around the world right now. Well, one night, I'm out late at night, and a car pulls up, and the windows on the car slowly, slowly roll down. In the neighborhood I grew up in, guess what you do when that happens? Yeah, you want to get down really quick. I hear a voice, and the voice I hear is the voice of this woman right here, who I endearingly call Mama Jackson. Now, see if you can figure out who I am in the picture. That's me in my Washington Redskins Sears catalog coat. That was during the late 70s, early 80s when the Redskins used to win football games. That's my buddy Sean. I could only hang out with Sean till 5, 6 o'clock at night because Mama Jackson knew what? What all good moms know, who your children hang out with is going to have a tremendous impact on their future. So she sees me out there in the middle of the night. She knows what I'm out there doing. And she's like, look, Christian, the fun and games are over. Don't you ever, ever set foot on our property again. I'm going to call the school tomorrow. I'm going to make sure you're not in any of Sean's classes. And I remember thinking to myself, dang, I know I'm bad, but I'm not that bad. I can never go to school with him ever again. Well, luckily, Sean started explaining to his mom the reality of my home life. He's like, look, Mom, when I go over to Christian's house, it's this strange house. They've been in this house for like over 10 years. They have no pictures up on the wall. There's a lot of yelling, hitting, fighting. I'd come home from school every day, open up the refrigerator 5,000 times, hoping that something would magically appear in the refrigerator. When nothing would appear in the refrigerator, I'd start punching holes in the wall, fighting with my younger siblings. Depending where my mom's mental health was, she'd wash my sheets for me every single night, so I never had to sleep in the same sheets twice. My wife, Wendy, has not caught the vision of that. She makes me sleep in the same sheets more than one night. She actually heard me say this the other day at a conference, like in front of like 1,200 people. She's like, you can wash your own damn sheets. And that's the rest of the story. So Sean explains some of this bizarreness to his mom. And a couple days later, I'm walking to school, and Mama Jackson comes flying out of her house in this blue bathrobe. You know how you can remember some things from your childhood like they're yesterday, if they're life-changing? She has this blue bathrobe on. She's like, I'll tell you what, if you'll start going to school every day, I want to see your report cards. If you start answering to me, you can come eat in our house anytime you want. Now, Mama Jackson's a seriously, seriously good cook. That's the real reason why I'm in top physical condition right now. So it's pretty much an informal foster care situation. She took over and started raising me. Well, long story short, she gave me the tools to graduate from college, again, with severe learning disabilities. In the U.S., only 2% of my peers in special ed, there's mild, moderate, severe learning. Millions of kids go to college with mild learning disabilities. Everyone in this room can be classified as having a mild learning disability. This doesn't affect your social, occupational functioning, able to thrive. With moderate to severe learning disabilities, about 2% get a bachelor's degree, and 0.5%, not even 1%, get a master's degree. So statistically, I had a better chance of playing the NBA and becoming LeBron James than staying up here right now and telling you all this crazy story. That means 99.5% of my peers in special ed don't get the opportunity that I received. So I kind of did my thesis in graduate school. I started focusing on the impact that learning disabilities has on poverty and crime. I learned that over 70% of youth in our youth correction system have a learning difference. Over 80% of adult prison population has a learning difference. Now, there's many reasons why someone's incarcerated besides a learning difference. It just happens to be 70, 80% of the time. That's an X factor. I learned that over 70% of people on TANF, on public assistance, have learning disabilities. So I argue, this is crazy. I can go to a third grade classroom, and with over 80% accuracy, I can show you who's going to fill up these systems. We know where these children are by third grade. Why in the world would we not give them access to evidence-based social and emotional education? I learned in graduate school that 80% of change, 80% of success, and it's going to lead to a lot of change in your life, comes from your ability to understand what? Your own emotions and behaviors and the emotions and behaviors of others. If my friend right here yells out right now, this is the stupidest workshop I've been to, all we've heard is your stupid life story, I want some tools. I'm a therapist, I'm aware, we're going to get to the meat. But if I understand why she's yelling at me, I'm likely not to yell back at her. If I don't understand why she's yelling at me, what am I going to do? I'm going to yell right back at her because I don't understand my own emotions, let alone another human being's emotions. So they have found over the lifespan, 80% of success comes from EQ. Many school systems spend less than 10% of their time giving kids access to evidence-based social and emotional education, even though it accounts for over 80% of success. It's your ability to transition from high school to college, to stay in college, to get a job, to stay in that career, to advance into that career, to stay in a marriage. I mean, you never stop using emotional intelligence. A lot of times we're spending less than 10% of our time giving kids the information they most need. Does that have anybody else worked up besides me? Like, wait. I'm not just a little bit worked up about it. I got so worked up about it when I saw that data. I traveled 3 million miles. Does that make sense? Screaming this same message. But people started saying to me, well, Christian, you can scream about this all you want, but what's the solution? What's the tool? How do we give them access? I had a professor that came to me in college and said, look, Christian, you have an amazing story. You're able to make it this far in school with your background, with your learning disabilities. And just real quick, because of who this audience is, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. But basically, I graduated from high school at 19 and a half, almost 20 years old, fell in love with this beautiful girl named Wendy. I thought, I'd love to marry this girl, but I don't know how to run a cash register at McDonald's. The average income for people with my background is about $12,000 a year. I had no clue, even when I was 28 years old, what was I going to do that someone's going to pay me over $12,000 a year? So anyways, I fall in love with Wendy. I thought, man, I'd love to marry her. I don't know how to run a cash register at McDonald's. I don't know what 9 times 6 is. I don't know how to tell time on a hand clock. To me, 4:45 equals 25 minutes to 5, but they tell me a quarter is what? 15. How could a quarter not be 25? So I said, Wendy, you need to run from someone like me. I might be fun on a date, but again, your life will be hell if you marry me. So I break up with her because they say if you really love someone, if you're going to hurt them, you should probably set them free. So I set her free. I said, Wendy, you need to run. You need to marry one of these guys that can make over $50,000 a year, that work in the high-tech industry, because I was street smart enough. Does that make sense? To show her these are the type of people that you'll have a much better life with. And so I break up with her. She comes to me a couple days later. She's like, I know you're learning disabled. I know you're dumb, lazy, rebellious, attitude problem, troublemaker. She gives me all my labels. And then she gets down on one knee and she proposes to me. And she says, if you marry me, you never ever have to worry about employment. I'll support you. I'll take care of you for the rest of your life. I thought to myself, I may be learning disabled, but this homeboy ain't stupid. That's the woman for me. And I married her because I really did love her, not because I never had to work another day in my life. Well, she says to me, why don't you apply to the local college? It's a place called UVU. And I applied to the local college. And I said, well, I don't have the math. I don't have the foreign language. I've never taken the SAT. Kids like me can't go to college. And she said, well, just apply. You won't be able to graduate. Just go for one semester. We can put on your resume you attended college for one semester. And I said, well, Wendy, this is a waste of time. They're not even going to let me in. And I filled out the application, got accepted. I'm jumping up and down on the couch, and Wendy's like, Christian, it's open enrollment. They let everybody in. Calm down. Now, hold on. I get why you all are laughing at that. But I talk to hundreds of thousands of students every year in all 50 states that do not know the real requirements to go to college. They think they have to have math, foreign language, take the SATs. They don't realize the reality of higher education. We still communicate it is for this elite group. Does that make sense? That has access to this. You cannot access something you don't know about. And I talk to thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids every year that do not know the truth of higher education in America, that it is a business. Does that make sense? You hand them money, they'll let you. No, I'm just kidding. But it's a little few more complicated. But does that make sense? They don't know the reality of it. We all know the reality, but we got to let these kids know the reality of higher education. And so I'm there at UVU. I quickly have all Fs, and another student changed my life. He says, you get just as much credit with a D- as you do with an A+. I went and asked the school counselor. I said, is that true? She's like, yeah, but you won't be able to transfer. You won't be able to go to graduate school. Like, that was my big concern at the time. But she said, you'll get college credit. And so I went to every class. It's called my no F game plan. I shoot for an A, but I never, ever, ever get below a D-. For example, we just took 500 kids in Los Angeles that had all Fs. We taught them these 3 things, and over 70% of the kids started passing all their classes. So I'd go to every class, sit on the front row like my friend here is. I'd lean forward, act interested, and I would sit on the front row, raise my hand every 5 minutes, annoy the professor. And then once the professor knew who I was, I'd behave. Because in a lot of college classes, there's this many people in the classroom. The teacher doesn't know me from Adam, so I've got to get some serious help. So I'd sit on the front row, annoy the teacher. Once they know me, I would behave really good. And then I would do all the homework assignments. And then I would do enough extra credit to get a D-. I would ask the professor for help. They'd say, if I help you, it's not fair to the other students. It's not in the syllabus. So I'd already have 5 things written down. And I would just point to one of them. If the professor said, go do a 20-page paper, like say on the Civil War, I would do a 30-page paper. I would always do a little bit more than what the professor was asking for. And I noticed something magic. They would always open up another door for me. So if you go to every class, sit on the front row, engage with the professor, do all the homework assignments, and do enough extra credit to get a D-. Guess how many D-minuses you'll get? 0. You'll get A, Bs, and Cs, even if you fail almost every test. I was speaking the other day in a state, won't tell you which one, to all the school administrators, and they said, Christian, you're teaching these kids how to beat the system. And I said, wait a minute, when the straight A students go to every class, sit on the front row, do all the homework assignments, and do enough extra credit to become the valedictorian, we give them scholarships and celebrate them. But when I take kids with my background and teach them the exact same academic hustle, I'm teaching them how to beat the system. Does that make sense? You see the challenge we have? We have to let all kids, thank you, amen. Can I get an amen? Sorry. But we have to let these kids. See, my son who's in this room right now is going to have a massive higher ed advantage because I know how to teach them. Does that make sense? How the system, how to jump through the hoops. But I was a first generation college student. Does that make sense? So I didn't know. I didn't even know. I was at UVU for almost 2 years before I even knew they had services for students with disabilities. Does that make sense? Then some people advocate. But my NOAF game plan did not work in math or foreign language. So I couldn't graduate. And so they said to me, why don't you apply to the other university here? Now remember, I don't even know what 9 times 6 is. Can't tell time on a hand clock. I wrote a letter. I said, dear BYU, I don't meet any of your requirements, but I want to be a social worker. This is why I want to be a social worker. People like me, we break into your home, your cars, into your homes. Please let me into this university. Apparently BYU doesn't get a lot of letters like that. And they said, a professor by the name of Dr. Shirley Cox adopted me as a special project and said, Christian, you can come study social work. Nothing else. They said if you're responsible for putting fuel in the space shuttle, it will never get off the launch pad. That's not reasonable. Anyways, but so they said, you come study social work. This professor's like, look, Christian, do me a favor, write down for me on a piece of paper, how did you make it this far in our school with your background? So I wrote down a few principles on a piece of paper. I wrote down I had to stop crashing. I had to realize my decisions had consequences. No one's going to pay me over $6 an hour if I kept crashing on this roller coaster. I had to tear off my labels. I had to learn how to control my defense mechanisms. You know, defense mechanism is a bulletproof vest for your feelings. It's how you protect yourself in a pressure situation. When I was in school, the teacher would say, turn to page 130 and read out loud. I didn't know how to read, so I'd swear at the teacher or punch the kid next to me because I'd much rather be sent to the principal's office for acting out behaviorally than having 30 kids laughing at me because I don't know how to read. Now I realize, why was I doing that? I had no control of my defense mechanisms. I call this the motivation formula. Life's problems are like water, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, about resilience. Is you take your challenges and you channel them through these dams. It can create electricity. By the way, anybody know what the fish says when it hits the wall? Dam. That's my best joke. This is a tribute to my home state of Maryland. If you put a bunch of live crabs in a pot, if you don't put a lid on the pot, why can't the crabs get out of the pot? And the kids will say, well, the other crabs are reaching up and pulling them down. So I'll say, hey, your friends you're skipping school with, you're doing drugs with, gangbanging, stealing, fighting, running away. All they're doing is they're pulling you down. They're keeping you in the pot. Now, each one of these metaphors are reinforced with music, physical activities. And we've put like 3 million kids, I'll just flash these really fast, through these 10 visual metaphors. And to be really frank with you, with lots of kids across this country, we really succeeded with it. We looked at their GPA and test scores before they learn these skills and their GPA and test scores after they learn these skills. Then we would take that data back to the school administrators and say, hey, this is why we need to spend more time on emotional intelligence. And that's how we kind of landed and expanded, got into these 25,000 schools across the country, became one of the largest behavioral programs. So a school psychologist one day showed me that 80% of the kids I work with are visual learners. So I took the most evidence-based mental health practice and just started delivering it in a visual delivery system. So the child would visually see it, hear it in music they listen to. And then we have hundreds of physical activities, art activities. I would say, draw me a picture of what life is like when you're next to this wall. Draw me a picture of what life would be like when we got away from this wall. Well, again, we had a lot of success teaching this. I knew what skills to teach kids. I had data to show, these are some skills you can teach them. This is how you teach them. But what I couldn't figure out is what motivates a child to go from standing next to this wall right here and getting on top of this wall. Where we knew the skills of resilience, hard work, determination, perseverance. But 20 years later, I wanted to know, God, the Holy Grail, the X factor is to figure out, where does the resilience come from within? Everybody catch that? Where does the motivation come from to stop crashing, to tear off those labels, to stay in school, to work on these retention issues? Where does the inner motivation? I had professors, even in college, that said to me, we'll never figure out where resilience is born. Either you have resilience, you can't just hand someone a prescription for resilience. Would anybody here like to have a prescription for resilience? For your students? You imagine having that prescription? Here's the inner motivation to not shut down. Raise your hand if you'd be interested in knowing what that is. So I spent, again, almost 20 years of my life, 20 years of my career helping kids like me, kids with learning disabilities, behavioral disorders. And I almost never paid any attention to another population. These kids never came into my office. School systems didn't really ask me to work with them as I was out across this country. And that's the kid who has this almost the exact same background that I had. They have maybe tremendous trauma at home, in their community. Their own personal life is based on a lot of different challenges and trauma. Mom might be in prison. Dad's an alcoholic or something. But the kid is still thriving. The kid got a scholarship to college. He's staying in school. That population doesn't come across people like, I'm a social worker. Does that make sense? I don't work with that population. And I was like, wait a minute. I'm going to start paying attention to the high flyers who have tremendous trauma in their lives. What are they tapping into that is enabling them when they're dealing with intense social problems, tremendous suffering? What's enabling them to push through and not give up? And that's what I want to spend here, the rest of the time here, focused on the next 40 minutes, is showing you where resiliency comes from. They did a 20-year longitudinal study in Hawaii called the Kauai Resilience Project. Some of you may have heard that. They wanted to know 2 kids grow up in the same home, the same neighborhood, the same background. One kid makes it out, the other kid doesn't make it. I saw this in my own family. Some of my older siblings spent time being incarcerated. I was able to become a national advocate. My social work training taught me you would look at the environment, right? You'd see the environment, and I believe the environment and both nature and nurture both play a role, except I kept seeing all these kids across this country, because we had access to over 3 million kids. I started seeing all these kids that were transcending. Does that make sense? They were overcoming their environment. I was like, are these just anomalies? Or could we figure out what in the heck is causing this kid to push through, to stay in the fight and not give up? Now, I know this sounds a little morbid, but if I was going to pass away tomorrow and someone said to me, what's the last advice you'd give your 2 boys, Cooper and Carson? I would tell them the second most powerful thing their dad ever learned was this concept of resilience, this ability to bounce back. I went to my publisher. I said, I want to name the book Resilience, the Second Greatest Principle in the World. And they're like, Christian, you live in America. Do you think anybody cares what the second greatest principle in the world is? In America, they want to know what. What's the greatest? What's the number one principle? So if according to Christian Moore, the ability to bounce back, and all joking aside, that's the second most powerful thing anybody's ever taught me, is how to see my pain, my suffering, the opposition, the trauma, the difficulty is a reason to create a productive outcome. That's all joking aside. That's the most powerful thing outside of one thing anybody has ever taught me. Anybody want to take a guess what the greatest principle in the world is? If resilience is the second greatest, anybody brave enough to yell it out? I think I maybe heard one. What's the most powerful thing you've ever come across in your life? Yeah, there you go. The Beatles got it right when they said all you need is love. There might have been a few teachers before the Beatles. I like to give the Beatles. Anyway, love is the most powerful thing I've ever come across. The love I have for my son Carson here, Cooper, my wife Wendy, that love is unbelievable. It causes me to put one foot in front of another, oftentimes when I feel like giving up. Having the opportunity to meet millions of kids across this country, the love you have for your students, the love I have for these students, why we do this work. There's lots of easier jobs than what everybody in this room has. But we stay in the fight, I believe, because of this love. Now, in the world of resilience, we've been able to identify what that love looks like. If I was Anthony Robbins or my friend Covey, I might emphasize, sometimes love has to have strings attached, has to have rules, accountability. As a business owner, if my employees don't do A, B, or C, I might have to let them go, right? So it's a little more conditional, right? Now, in the world of success, conditional love is really important. Now, let me tell you something. This workshop today is not on success. This workshop you're hearing right now has nothing to do with success. It's about the ability to bounce back. It's about the ability to be resilient. And we know human beings are 100 times more likely to bounce back if they're exposed to unconditional love. They're in an environment where they know they have value and worth, whether they succeed or whether they fail. So the relationship is not just predicated upon success. For example, as a therapist, how I do this, when kids come into my office, I have 2 chairs in my office. I have a metal folding chair that I spray painted, I dented it up, I put gum on it. It's the nastiest chair in the world. I actually spent like 2 years balancing on 3 legs, had to go see a chiropractor. My wife's like, why don't you sit on 4 legs? I'm like, because this is the most powerful tool I have in my arsenal. Because what would happen is the kid would come into my office. Now, the kid that would come into my office is the kid that brought that knife to school or the gun. I usually have to write the letter to the attorney general saying it's safe for this kid to go back there in severe trouble, right? So they come in. I have a $2,000 leather chair called the Batman chair. So when the kid comes in, I'll say, pick a chair, either chair. What chair do you think they head to? Yeah, they head right to the metal fully because they know they're in trouble. They know I'm the LCSW. I write the letter. I'm the expert. I should be in the nice, $2,000 leather chair. So when they come in, the magic happens is right before they sit in the chair, I say, no. You sit in a nice leather chair. They'll plop down in my leather chair. They'll spin around 3 or 4 times. They'll literally have a party in the leather chair in about 8 to 12 minutes. They'll say, here, Mr. Moore, here's your chair back. Because they know I'm the expert. I should be where? In the nice leather chair. And again, this is where the magic happens. I say, no. You lived your life for the past 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years. You stay in the nice leather chair. Because when I asked that kid to go back to class, stay in school, not give up, make it through that freshman year of college, it's not because of a magic program. It's a relationship. We have over 100 tools. I don't even begin to have enough time right now in how to surrender the one-up relationship. Everybody catch that? Just if I said everybody here, write down 5 people you most enjoy being around, I promise you they're usually going to be someone who, whether they know your strengths and they know your weaknesses, but they treat you the same either way. I know those are the people I most enjoy being around, are people that focus on what's right with me, not what's wrong with me. So that's what I mean by in the world of resilience, we believe that love is the greatest principle. We want to expose them. A person is more likely to stay in school, push through, overcome whatever the trauma is, if they're exposed to unconditional love versus conditional love. I'll love you. I'll be with you. I do an activity with adults when I have more time. I'll say, write down all the situations you're in that are conditional. If you want to increase your happiness tremendously, increase the situations, people, and things that you're around that are more unconditional than conditional, and your happiness will shoot through the roof. Your resilience will shoot through the roof. Your motivation to push through. But when we're in situations where someone will only love or care about us, if we do exactly what they ask, it's not healthy. It might help you be successful because this is not a workshop on success. It will help you be resilient. Everybody catch the nuance of that? That's about an hour presentation because I'm highly aware of who's in this room. I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version, not giving you the hour speech. Everybody catch that? Raise your hand if that made sense, what I just said there, because that's an important thing in the world of resilience. A human being is much more likely to bounce back in that situation. And so we define resilience as this. Resilience is the ability to bounce back when you have every reason to shut down, but you fight on. Resilient people have both tapped and untapped reserves. What I mean by untapped reserves is I had 2 talents growing up. Maybe a few of you picked up on it. I could talk nonstop, and I could draw really good. Guess how I make a living today? I took everything in mental health, made it visual, and I talk nonstop. It's the greatest country in the world. But when I was a kid, they sent me down to the principal's office every 5 minutes for what? Nonstop talking. Maryland has corporal punishment. So they would literally beat me with a wood paddle for my nonstop talking. I look back at that, I think, man, they should have put the wood paddle down and said, look, Christian, this is a gift. A lot of people are afraid that the number one phobia in America is public speaking. You have conduct disorder. You don't really care what other people think about you. This might be a gift. He could have celebrated. Does that make sense? My ability to speak nonstop instead of beating me. So years later, 25 years later or so, I became a therapist. And I started diagnosing children. I would give a diagnosis. I'd notice that the mom would come in with the child. Mom and dad would come in. I would diagnose the child. They would leave more depressed. They'd come in frustrated. I would give the diagnosis, and they were frustrated. There might be a little bit of hope because they know what the diagnosis is, but I was like, man, there's got to be another way of doing this. So what I started to do several years ago is every time I gave a diagnosis to a child, I'd bring in a chocolate cake, and I would light the candles on the cake. I'd pass out party hats, those things that blow out, and I'd go, I got great news for you. Your child has ADHD. We're going to have a party right now. And they'd be like, why are we celebrating the ADHD? I said, look, we live in a fast-paced society. People would kill to have this energy. I'm going to show you step by step how ADHD can be the greatest resource in your life. And then I say, look, Mom, look at this Newsweek article. 70% of CEOs in America, guess what they have? ADHD. They work 100-hour work weeks. Entrepreneurs are high risk takers. 80% of businesses go out of business within 3 to 4 years. Guess who keeps capitalism going? People with conduct disorder. Look at the entire banking industry in America. But anyways, that makes it the ability to take, does that make those, I'm joking, but actually there's data behind this. There's research behind this. That's who, functional people go get jobs with security, retirement, benefits. That makes sense? That's not what keeps capitalism. Does that make sense? In America, you have to have high risk taking behavior. So I would celebrate whatever the diagnosis was, and I noticed something. Mom and dad would walk out And I call it the resilient hop. You know, they'd have a hop in their step, they'd have their arm around the child, they would be interacting completely different with the child just because I reframed. Does that make sense? Whatever the diet, because 90% of the social problems that walk into my office, I cannot get rid of. But I can show the child or the family how to use it as the greatest resource in their life. And that's the most powerful thing I have ever learned, this ability to do that, this ability to be resilient. That's kind of what, of course, that's what I focus the book on. But, so I alluded to this a few minutes ago. Have you ever wondered why? You know, two kids grow up in the same home, the same neighborhood. One kid makes it out, the other kid doesn't make it. What is this X factor? And again, I was told in college, either you have resilience or you don't. You will never be able to hand someone resilience on a silver platter. Now, I'm going to say something pretty bold, that if I heard this at a conference anytime in the last 20 years, I would have started laughing. If someone stood up and said, I'm going to hand you resilience on a silver platter, I'm going to show you where resilience is born. First of all, I would have jumped out of my chair, ran to the front of the room, and turned on every recording device I could possibly get my hands on, because that's a pretty big deal. That's a big statement. Here's the inner motivation. When you feel like giving up, you feel hurt, depressed, sad, you come to a dead end, you're rock bottom. These are the tools that will help you push through. And I want to spend the rest of the time answering that question. And I'm so excited about it. I want to rip off my jacket, jump on this table, and do a jig. Actually, I did do a jig when I found out, holy cow. We know exactly, we could pinpoint, what are people tapping into? We kept seeing 4 things pop up over and over and over again when people had tremendous trauma and they were working through it and they were having success with it. We kept seeing these patterns over and over again. And this is what we learned. The metaphor I like to use is a metaphor of a gas station. And I was doing work from Detroit to Baltimore to Chicago, every major urban environment, almost every major city in this country. And again, I spent most of my time just focused on kids with my background, but then I said, wait a minute, I'm going to pay attention to these kids that have major trauma, major opposition, but they're pushing through. What are they tapping into? What we realized was we kept seeing this theme. We started calling it, they kind of were flipping a switch. It's like this gas pump. If I wanted to turn this gas pump on, I'd have to flip the switch to be able to access the fuel source down here. Now, I spent 8 years in college, $65,000 being trained in something called positive psychology. Pretty much everybody here has been influenced by positive psychology. What we say to ourselves is going to lead to our actions, it's going to lead to our behaviors, so we probably want to say positive things. So if you go to Barnes & Noble, Border Books, any major bookstore, go to the self-help section, I promise they're all going to teach you. If you haven't read every one of those books like me, I'll save you a lot of time and money. They all teach the same thing. What you say to yourself is going to lead to your actions, going to lead to your behaviors, so say positive things, right? Common sense. But I noticed something. When I started traveling, I started meeting literally millions of children, I started reading at the same time hundreds of biographies, and I would highlight the minute a person started to change. Because the first thing you have to be resilient is what? So resilience shows up when suffering shows up. You have to have some type of suffering. When suffering shows up, you're going to have negative emotions. You're going to be dealing with depression, anger, frustration. You're going to feel like giving up. And you'll see that instantly kick in. When I start reading all these biographies, I start highlighting the minute a person starts to change. And I start asking all these kids that are overcoming tremendous opposition, and I'm noticing something. Guess how much positive self-talk I'm seeing? Almost zero. I'm seeing sadness, anger, frustration. I remember the first time I noticed this, I'm reading Christopher Reeve's biography. Everybody know the story of Christopher Reeves? He's this incredible actor. He plays Superman. He's this great athlete. He's riding a horse. He gets thrown off a horse. He's paralyzed. He says to his wife, look, I'm rock bottom. I cannot take this. I had this world, by the tail. I was thriving, and now I've lost everything. I can't deal with life. And he begs her to help him commit suicide. She negotiates with him and says, look, stay alive for the kids. Let's see if you can make a difference in the paralysis community. But just hang in there, Christopher. If you still feel like this in a few months, we'll relook at it, and everybody knows the rest of the story. He hangs in there, and what does he do? He makes a massive difference in the paralysis community and just pushes through and inspires the world. So I thought, man, that's interesting. But in the book, he kept talking about he still felt sadness, he still felt hurt. I remember reading Oprah's biography. She was severely emotionally abused, physically abused, sexually abused. And she talked about how she took that anger, that rage, and created a productive outcome. I'm thinking, this is the opposite of anything I've ever been taught. Does that make sense? My entire life, I was so trained and socialized in that the only thing that has value in this world is what? Something that's positive. Does that make sense? Positive thoughts. Anything else has no value. And I kept reading book. Nelson Mandela is in this prison camp for 27 years, and how he takes that disrespect and uses it as fuel to create reconciliation. I'm just like, man. And then a few months ago, I'm at a conference. I'm teaching this concept of flipping the switch. And by the way, the flipping the switch question, so the first thing you have to be resilient. You have to have some type of suffering. You have to have something to bounce back from. And then the second step is you have to say to yourself, how can I use this suffering? How can I use this pain as my fuel source? How can I use it as my best friend? Until you ask that question, you're not bouncing back. I had this gentleman the other day pull me aside and said, look, Christian, I know exactly what we're talking about. My 17-year-old son this past year was killed by a 23-year-old drunk driver. And of course, he goes, I was enraged, I was angry, by far my rock bottom, worst thing that ever happened to me. And he said, I kept passing the jail where the 23-year-old was being held, and I felt this enraged. I went through counseling. My marriage has been falling apart. We're dealing with all kinds of problems. But he said, finally, I got permission. I said, I've got to go meet with this young man. And he got permission, sat down with him and said, look, if you're experiencing half the pain I'm experiencing, I'm going to go through this process with you. And he was transparent. He said, I feel this anger. I feel this rage. But I want to be here for you while you go through the legal process. I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to work with you. Now, I'm not saying Christian Moore would have the ability to do that. I have no idea if I'd have the ability to do that. But do human beings have the ability to bounce back, to flip that switch under pretty much any circumstance? Check this out. Me and a bunch of therapists right now, we're studying right now, trying to figure out what is a situation that a human being cannot bounce back from. Guess how many we have found? When this situation happens, a person can't flip the switch and bounce back. We can't find one. Zero. That is the most powerful thing I have learned in almost 50 years on planet Earth. We cannot find a situation where a human being cannot be resilient and bounce back. Does that have anybody else excited besides me? I'm not just a little bit excited about that. I am highly excited. And if you study the human condition, you can look at Viktor Frankl during World War II, the Holocaust. Once you're aware of this, you can just see example after example of people. And like I said, I'm not saying I have the ability to do that. I'm a hypocrite right now. Does that make sense? I'm working towards it. I'm trying to figure out what enables this person to bounce back under these circumstances where this person's not bouncing back. Everybody catch that? That's very fascinating to me. And is it information? Because everything I learn is knowledge. Does that make sense? The more knowledge you have, the more what? Insight that comes. The most change happens in people's lives is through knowledge usually. And that's why people go into education. That's why education is one of the most important things on this planet. So when I kept seeing this over and over again, I became very fascinated by that. I'm like, all right, so you have a crisis. You have opposition, you're able to flip the switch, you say to yourself, how can I use this pain as my best friend? Now, it's one thing to tell a child, I want you to tap into both your positive and negative emotions. Does anybody here besides me ever have negative emotions? Thank you. 3 people are brave enough to raise their hand. That is awesome. It's interesting. I'll ask that question sometimes to 2,000 people. Anybody have negative emotions? And the same thing happens. 3 people are brave enough to say they have negative emotions, even though every human, you have something like 48,000 different emotions during the day. And some of those emotions are positive, and some of those emotions are negative. Every day, all day long, between now and being 6 feet under, you are going, it's the human condition. Everybody's experiencing positive, negative emotions. But you just saw in this room, we're scared to death to admit publicly we have negative emotions. Let me give you an example. I woke up this morning, I'm not even being funny when I say this. My hairline is receding more. I'm getting shorter, fatter, goofier. I couldn't even find my neck this morning. So I said, because of that, I'm going to try to give a better speech. Does that make sense? I was feeling depressed. I was feeling frustrated. But here's the secret. Now I know I'm going to experience negative emotions. Everybody experiences negative emotions, but I'm going to create a productive outcome with those negative emotions. The great thing about America is America will forgive you if you create a productive outcome. You can pretty much have any problem under the sun. But if you create a productive outcome, you don't hurt yourself or others, and you create a productive outcome, the world is your oyster. That's one of the great things about this great country. So it's one thing for me to tell a child, I want you to tap into these negative emotions, but where's the motivation going to come from to do that? One way we teach this to kids, and we're doing this by 3rd grade, we teach kids that, look, you're going to have, to charge a battery, could you charge a battery with just a positive connection? So can I propose that question? Can you charge a battery with a positive connection? No. Can you charge a battery with a negative connection? No. What enables the battery to charge, we all know, is what? Is the combination between the positive and negative. For example, if me being here talking to you guys today was dependent upon these emotions, would I be in this room right now if the ability to thrive, to have success, to overcome, to be resilient, if it was only dependent upon happiness, motivation, love, peace, trust, optimism, and acceptance, I'm not within 500 miles of this room right here. Everybody catch that? I'm in this room right now because luckily, I told you a story of my amazing Mama Jackson. I remember her sitting down with me and saying, look, Christian, I cannot get rid of your parents' divorce. I can't get rid of this neighborhood. I can't get rid of your learning disabilities. I can't get rid of the graduation requirements or whatever the opposition is. But she said to me, you have to use this pain, Christian. You have to use this anger, this rage, this frustration as a reason to turn in your homework. Stay in school, make better decisions. I had hit the lotto. And she had no expertise in resilience. Everybody with me on that? She had no idea what she was planning to me. She was showing me exactly that I had an opportunity to use my negative emotions just as much as my positive emotions as a fuel source. So this is going to, the statement on my gravestone is going to be, there's no law in the universe that says you cannot use negative emotions as a fuel source to create a productive outcome. Does that make sense? To do positive things, to work harder, to be more loving, to be more kind, to be more, there's no law in the universe. So ideally, I would want 90% of kids and families I work with, I would want their emotions to be positive and 10% of their emotions to be negative. But most people that come into my office, it's the complete opposite. Does that make sense? 90% of their emotions are dealing with anger, frustration, sadness, depression. If I can't show them how to create a productive outcome, how to use that as a reason to listen to their professor, to stay in school, to be more motivated, to work harder, they have a huge resilience. If you have to wait for positive emotions to show up, to bounce back, you're at a resilience disadvantage. Now, stay with me. In the world of success, if I was Anthony Robbins or my friend Covey, I would only be talking to you about this stuff. But my workshop is on resilience. I would rather my 2 boys, Cooper and Carson, have the ability to bounce back from life's lows than to be, quote, successful. Success, I don't even know what success is or how to define it. Success is fleeting. It comes, it goes, a couple of years ago, I got invited to a White House convening, and then I tore a knee ligament, had a challenge at work, crashed a car. One of my kids dealt with some sickness. Does that make sense? And so to have the ability to bounce back from life's lows, you're much, much more likely to have success over the lifespan if you can get through those lows. But we spend all of our time focused on success, but we don't give the child the resilience, the grit, the determination to be able to push through those lows so that they can have that more long-term success. Now, that's a 2-hour speech I'm giving to you in 5 minutes, but everybody with me, right? So we were trying to do. And so what we realized today, in 2018, psychology is starting to realize is this. All emotion is energy. We're starting to get less and less concerned whether emotions are positive or negative. What we care about is, can the person create a productive outcome whether the emotion is positive or negative? Now, me, I have chronic anxiety. Now, I might need medication, traditional treatment. I'm not minimizing if you have chronic depression or anxiety or some of the issues I have, you might need traditional intervention. Everybody with me on that? Please do not hear me wrong. I'm a therapist, I'm a clinical, so I'm highly aware of that. But what we're realizing is, even when we do some of those interventions, we might need medication or cognitive behavioral support, at the same time, it does not hurt them to show them step by step how to create a productive outcome, whether the emotion is positive or negative. It's actually very empowering. A few months ago, I got invited to speak to 400 soldiers here in the Utah National Guard about how to tap into this resilience, their positive and negative emotions. I had the most unbelievable experience. I've shared this many, many times. When I was teaching this to these soldiers here in Utah that had been deployed 3 times, I got to this point in the metaphor, and I said to them, you guys, to have negative emotions is as normal as breathing. Everybody has negative emotions. We front like we don't, but everybody feels sad, hurt, angry. It's as normal as drinking a glass of water. It's extremely normal. And the soldiers stood up 3 times and started giving me a standing ovation when I was teaching, because they've been told their whole lives what? To buck up, to be strong, to show no vulnerability. And also vulnerability is a huge, huge part of resilience. I just shared with you guys I have an anxiety disorder and stuff, maybe being a little vulnerable there, sharing that with you. But the reason why I did that, I felt safe. Does that make sense to share that? And you can't get closer to someone. Relationships play a huge part of resilience. And you cannot get close to another human being unless you're authentic, unless you're real. You know, I'm around some people, when I'm around them, they show no vulnerability. Their lives are perfect. There's no risk. Does that make sense? They don't let you, can't get close to them. I've been around people sometimes 2 or 3 days for years, and you can only get so close to them because there's no vulnerability. If you want to increase your resilience, you have to be vulnerable. Does that make sense? You have to get help. You want to choose carefully who you're vulnerable with. But vulnerability is a huge, huge part of resilience. You have to get help from other people. So, just give you an example of this. Let's take an emotion like fear. I told you I have an anxiety disorder. Out of fear can come strength, can come survival, can come readiness. I shared with you, I succeeded with these 3 million kids. I succeeded with a bunch of them. I failed with a bunch of them. I don't want it. My fear of failure going into the future gave me the strength to work really, really hard. I've spent now almost 20 years trying to figure out where does this resilience come from within. That's taught me survival skills, gave me readiness to give you the speech, which in turn has given me resilience. I wouldn't get rid of my fears in life in a million years if I can create a productive outcome. Again, if they're causing me not to be able to get out of bed in the morning, I might need a different type of treatment. Everybody with me on that? So I'm not minimizing the importance of traditional therapy under certain circumstances. And so let's take another emotion. Let's take the emotion of anger. I spent years teaching anger management. I've worked in over 200 prisons in the United States teaching anger management. And I approach it, I still teach anger management, but I do it very different now. I show them how to take the anger, the energy from the anger, and create a productive outcome. As you do that, there's a conviction, there's a dignity. As you do that, for example, right now I'm doing some work in Flint, Michigan. Anybody know what's going on in Flint, Michigan right now? Yeah, water crisis. Tens of thousands of kids have been poisoned in Flint, Michigan. You think they're upset right now? You think they're angry in Flint, Michigan? They're not just a little bit angry in Flint, Michigan. They're enraged right now in Flint, Michigan. And so what I've emphasized there is you have to take that energy. That anger is okay if you create a productive outcome with it. So they're taking that energy. They're creating a whole child approach. They have a goal now to get more kids to college. They're meeting about what you guys are meeting about. Does that make sense? They know education is the way out. And so now they're looking at the whole child, their psychosocial, emotional. They have a conviction to change what's happening in that community. And there's a tremendous dignity happening there as they do that. So everybody with me on that? So now my goal is when I'm working with people who are dealing with tremendous opposition is to show them how to take the emotional state from the opposition, whether it's positive or negative, to create a productive outcome. And the book is called The Resilience Breakthrough because that's the breakthrough. This is the only book that will break down for you exactly what to do with your negative emotions. Everybody else is trying to extinguish them, get rid of them. I'm saying that's a fantasy world. I've been in this earth for almost 50 years. I've never not had negative emotions. Everybody in this room has had negative emotions throughout their lifespan. And you're in this room because you have the ability to create a productive outcome with it. Inmates, oftentimes, they've never been taught, does that make sense, how to take those negative emotions and create a productive outcome. We're doing some research there, looking at that, and it's very fascinating. I'm going to talk about that in just 1 minute here. Example. So one of the first places the resilience is born, and we saw this so many times lacking with these inmates across this country, is this. So resilience. So it's one thing to tell someone you got to tap into both your positive and negative emotions. But where's the motivation to come from to do that? The first place it's born is this called relational resilience. For example, this is a picture of my 2 boys, Cooper and Carson. If I never ever got invited to speak again, if this is my last speech, I would literally go work at 4 different, say, McDonald's, because these 2 kids are dependent upon me. Everybody catch that? So Carson is actually in the room with me, my hero. He got my genetics. He's kind of a little bit ADHD, has fun. And so with Carson, I'm constantly showing him how to take his energy and create a productive outcome. My other son, Cooper, has very different personality. So I'm showing him, he takes most of his positive emotions. I show him how to maximize his positive emotions. Everybody with me on that? So we're just just even my own kids, I do that. So when we started looking at, okay, what is enabling someone to bounce back? Where's resilience born? Now remember, most people will tell you, you'll never know where it comes from within. The first place it comes from is this, relational resilience. Your greatest motivation to not give up is the knowledge that others need you and you need them. That ability to push through. If I said to everybody in this room, write down 5 people that you need them and they need you, most people in this room could write down 5 or more people. You could write down 10 people. When we ask inmates that question, guess how many people they write down usually? Yeah, 1 or less, or 0. And we've asked thousands of inmates that question. I'm not saying that's the only reason you're in this room and you're resilient and not incarcerated. But yes, that is an X factor. Does that make sense? I make good decisions. I'm going to go on the road, like some months I'll go on the road 20 days a month. I've even had like the vice president of Delta say to me, how the crap do you travel that much? What gives you the strength to do that? It's because I need them, they need me. Does that make sense? It's that inner dependence that causes me to go through the motions and not give up. You do not have to be born with relational resilience. You can literally develop it. And so, all right, I got 15 minutes. Okay. You draw the strength from emotional support of others. You realize that your greatest power comes from human connection. Mama Jackson was that relationship for me. One of my favorite examples is Dick and Rick Hoyt, who ran in over 240 triathlons together. When he became the legs for his son, it completely transformed his life. So listen to his relational resilience here.
This is where they go to prove their mettle. Endurance racers from around New England, ready to take on an Olympic distance triathlon. Those who finish will swim a mile, bike 24, and run 6 more.
All right, welcome everyone.
But one man's got a tougher challenge than the rest. And it's not because he's one of the oldest guys here. It's because Dick Hoyt will pull, pedal, and push his son Rick, who was born without the ability to move or speak. This is how father and son spend their time together, nearly every single weekend, going back 30 years. Dick and Rick Hoyt have completed over 240 triathlons. And on their lazier Sunday afternoons, over 68 marathons, the fastest in a time just half an hour off the world record. Yes, the real world record. They say Dick Hoyt could have been an elite endurance athlete on his own. Dick's not so sure.
I just don't have the desire to be out there running by myself. I think it's just something that comes from his body to my body, and it makes us go faster.
Are you trying to say that you run faster pushing Rick than if you didn't run with him?
Oh yeah, he inspires me and he motivates me, and he's actually the athlete.
He's actually the athlete. He says something comes from my body to his body. You can see that, and that's what you don't see, but there's something that you feel. I wanted to know, what is he talking about? What is that causes someone to push through when they have every reason to give up? We know in 2018 it's relational resilience. And you do not have to be born with it. We can literally teach it to you very young. We can show you exactly where some of this motivation comes from. Anybody excited about that? You literally learn. Another example, Harriet Tubman freed over 200 slaves on the Underground Railroad. She was in my Maryland history books. I didn't really understand the real story until I went to her museum the other day. And they said, the slaves would want to turn back around. They would hear dogs coming towards them, lights coming towards them in the woods. And the real story is Harriet Tubman had a shotgun, and she'd explain to them, if you turn back around, I'd have to shoot you first. And they tended to keep walking with her. And she didn't lose one slave on the Underground Railroad. Why did she do that? She knew at what level they needed her, and she needed them, that inner dependence. Just a powerful, powerful example of relational resilience. She's also the grandmother of my profession, social work. She started the first retirement homes for African Americans in Philadelphia, did some of the first organized social work. You'll see soldiers coming home from war. They may be lost an arm, a leg, a limb. Oftentimes they'll say they want to go back. Do they want to go back for political reasons usually? No, it's camaraderie. It's the love for their fellow soldiers. I was talking to a 4-star general the other day, and he told me that relational resilience is the #1 goal of boot camp, is to create that interdependence. It has a mass. I was like, wow, that's fascinating. Because of time, I've got to skip a couple of these. One of my favorite examples, Mother Teresa. A couple years ago, she goes and gets the Nobel Peace Prize. The night before, they have this huge banquet in this beautiful room. They have it on the nicest china, nicest tablecloths. She finds out the cost of it. She's like, I'm not going. And they're like, no, you're Mother Teresa. We have presidents, dignitaries, the most important people in the world are going to give you this award. You have to show up. And Mother Teresa's like, nope, give me the freaking money. She didn't use the word freaking. That was me ad-libbing. I apologize. But they gave her the money, and she fed over 300 families for 4 years on the amount of money of an hour-and-a-half banquet. And that's why she's considered Saint Teresa. She understood that relational resilience, what level they needed her, she needed them. Because of time, I'm going to skip a couple of these here. So everybody with me on relational resilience? That's one of the first places that resiliency is born from within. These are some of the emotions you can tap into with relational resilience. The second place that resilience comes from is something called street resilience. Now, I'm in the genius range in this street resilience. Now, I've had to spend my life, I don't know what I did with my book. I had a book, oh, there it is. In the back of the book, you can see which of these, don't pull it out now, but you can see which of these 4 sources, does that make sense? That you're strongest in relational resilience, street resilience, resource, and rock bottom. So one day it hit me. I have very little, even though I'm an expert on it technically, but lived experience. I'm going to be vulnerable, take a risk here. In my home state here, I have almost no relational resilience. People who, my friend Cody, who travels with me, he can confirm this. I mean, I have to really work on my relational resilience. My business partner has 5 kids. He does tremendous community work, volunteer work. He is always motivated to push through, to not give up, because other people need him. They need it. I have something called reactive attachment disorder. We know what reactive attachment disorder, a lot of kids in foster care. You learn to connect through your parents, because both my parents had kind of some severe mental health issues, didn't really have that connection. It's one of the reasons I could travel 260 days a year as a speaker. Does that make sense? And experience no homesickness. I learned about relational resilience, studied it, wrote a book about it, and for the first time this year, I'm actually on the road traveling, crying, experiencing homesickness for the first time in my life. Relational resilience is painful. Anyways, so now me, I've had to develop my relational resilience. My business partner had almost no street resilience, and I was like, holy cow. If I could teach him how to be street resilient, he already has relational resilience, I could double his resilience. But what's really cool is a university could measure this. This doesn't have to be a theory. Does that make sense? We could literally see if this is empirical. Is this real? Could we literally teach someone where this inner motivation comes from when they're dealing with trauma, when they have every reason to drop out of school, to turn to the gang, the drugs, the violence, to commit suicide, to give up? Could we teach them exactly where the motivation comes from to push through? You take the pain, for street resilience, you take the pain of disrespect, social inequality, and mistakes, and use it as fuel to propel you forward. Any type of disrespect. It could be your ears are too big. Human beings will disrespect each other over skin color, our teeth aren't white enough, shoe size, weight, height, belief system, background, culture. What are the other reasons we hate on each other? I mean, there's a million reasons that human beings disrespect each other. Now, the ability to use that disrespect is a reason not to give up is powerful. I'll give you an example. I had a professor who came to me in college. He said, Christian, if you can get a college degree, my degree is worth less. I was his TA. I didn't know what 9 times 6 was. He's like, you should not be on this campus. I didn't even know how to type on his computer because my wife typed up all my papers. I had to type in psychological assessment. I'll never forget. I'm like, psychological, S-Y. And he's like, oh my gosh, you're in graduate school. You should not be here. I just found out, I walked home in tears when he told me that if I can get a college degree, his degree is worth less. I just found out that professor will be teaching this year out of 2 college textbooks. We're in the Introduction to School Social Work textbook, something called Evidence-Based RTI, PBIS. He actually has to lecture on my theories. How you like me now? And so you might say that's being cocky, or that's being, no, it's not. I'm being street resilient. You told me I'm not even good enough to be on this campus, and I'm going to use you telling me not to be good enough on this campus to change this world. And so that's street resilience. A couple years ago, I was the commencement speaker at Johns Hopkins. They wouldn't have let me in Johns Hopkins in a million years. Grew up 15 minutes from there. Johns Hopkins is surrounded by housing projects. So I stood up, I went rogue in the middle of my speech. I said, That shock anybody? I said, you should let the people in these housing projects, there should be a yellow brick road to Johns Hopkins. I said, this makes no sense. I'm here speaking because I got to spend 8 years with some of the top PhD behavioral specialists in this country. If you take those 8 years away from me, I'm not in this room right now. But we do in our societies, we take the people who do the best academically, and we have them spend time with the other people who do the best academically, and we know the way out of poverty is education. Wouldn't it make sense to take the people who have the least access to education and the systems and give them the most access if we really want to do something about poverty? And I went on for like another 20 minutes, which I don't have time about. But everybody with me, I'm trying to emphasize. For example, my company hired a golfer a couple of years ago named Bjorn, whose dad was a golf pro in the Lawrence Welk Resort. I can't golf at all. But he started showing me the nuance of the game, and now I can beat most hackers. Does that make sense when I'm golfing? Because I spent a couple of years, does that make sense, with a real golfer. It's exposure, exposure, exposure. And I said, look, so I go off about this. The dean gets up behind me and says, you know what? We never would have let Christian in this university, but we're going to hire him to be adjunct faculty and teach classes here at Johns Hopkins. #1 education program in the country. The greatest rush I've ever had was telling Johns Hopkins to kiss my left foot. I'm not going to, and telling them no. Instead of working with 30 college students, I'm going to go teach resilience to millions of people. And you can say, Christian, you're being cocky, you're being arrogant. I get all that. No, I'm not. I'm being street resilient. Does that make sense? You told me, do you see the motivation coming out of me just telling the story? I can't even see straight. I get so excited. So anytime I need inner motivation, I'm able to tap into relational resilience. I'm going to push through, not give up. Just like Christopher Reeves did for his children, I'm going to do for Carson. I'm going to tap into my street resilience when I feel like giving up. I'm going to think about the people who told me I wasn't worth anything. Does that make sense? I'm going to use that as a reason to become greater. That is a learned skill. You do not need to be born with either one of those. You can learn those. Are you excited about that? We can literally teach these kids by 3rd grade how to tap into this stuff. And by the way, past mistake. Anybody besides me made mistakes? You have to. The kryptonite of resilience, the #1 thing that will kill your resilience is guilt and shame, is to mess up, to make a mistake and not have the ability to bounce back from that mistake and not be able to forgive yourself. Resilience is done. Everybody catch that? You have to be able to give yourself grace. You have to be able to forgive yourself to be able to bounce back. And we see this over and over again where people are stuck. And the resilience process is because they're being hard on themselves. They're beating themselves up. We have to give ourselves forgiveness to be resilient. Can I get an amen? All right. How are we doing here? All right. 4 minutes. Okay. You convert the pain into the energy to create productive outcomes. You direct your hurt and anger towards a cause rather than an individual. Mothers Against Drunk Drivers is a powerful example of street resilience. Nelson Mandela is in a prison camp for 27 years. His main job is breaking up rock. His funeral was the most viewed funeral in human history. Why did hundreds of millions of people care about this man dying from every nation across this country? I would argue it was street resilience is why. One of my favorite stories is the prosecuting attorney that seeked the death penalty against Mandela. Mandela invites him to his house, says, look, I made huge mistakes. I messed up. I'm not the same person. I'm going to create reconciliation, and we're going to create some forgiveness. We're going to do something about this hate. The prosecuting attorney walks out of his house. A couple hours later, the national media is there and says, what do you think about Mandela now? This is a direct quote. He says, he's the most saintly man I've ever met. That's the prosecuting attorney seeking the death penalty. That's the power of taking hate, disrespect, and saying, I'm going to be more loving, more kind, more forgiving because of the hate. Everybody with me? That is a learned skill. You do not have to be born with it. If Nelson Mandela was in this room right now, he would tell you he's no different than your students. He has 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth. Someone showed him exactly how to create a productive outcome with disrespect. When people are saying, this isn't an option for you. You're not college material. You shouldn't be at this place. Rosa Parks refusing to sit on the back of the bus is a powerful, powerful example of street resilience. A few months ago, I just had the most unbelievable experience. Mama Jackson that I told you about who helped raise me, she just got the National Rosa Parks Award because we've reached over 3 million kids now. And Dr. Virgil Woods, who is one of Dr. King's best friends, read this book, learned about what we were doing, and he's like, Christian, it's great what you're doing, but there's no way you would have done any of this without Mama Jackson. They just gave her the Rosa Parks Award, which was one of the highlights. I'm like, Dad, you know the work. They hooked. No, I'm just kidding. But it's all good. No, just joking. I'm just joking. Don't go about that. I already told you the story about the professor. You know, one of my favorite examples is Abraham Lincoln, powerful example of street resilience. Cesar Chavez, what he did for migrant farm workers. He's seen they're being charged 25 cents, sometimes even 50 cents for a cup of water. They have these huge big water barrels in the back of these trucks. And he says, look, these workers are making very little money, and we're going to charge them for the water. That was his breaking point. That disrespect caused him to unionize, and we know that the rest is American history. Gandhi, Michael Jordan getting cut from the JV basketball team. They said his Hall of Fame speech was one of the worst Hall of Fame speeches of all time because Jordan got up and gave a speech on street resilience. The national media knew what relational resilience was. They wanted him to talk about his third grade teacher that helped him, his dad putting lights on the basketball court. But Jordan got up and gave a discourse on street resilience. I just want to play a little segment here. And by the way, he did push off on Brian Russell. I'm a huge jazz fan, but that's another workshop. I'm not going to give many props on that. But
competitive nature has gone
listen to the
a
street
long
resilience.
way from the first time I picked up any sport, baseball, football, ran track, basketball, anything that missed class, I played it. When you think about, so they started the fire in me. That fire started with my parents. And then, as I moved on in my career, people added wood to that fire. Coach Smith, what else can I say about him? He's a legendary in his, in the game of coaching. And then there's Leroy Smith. Now you gotta think that's a myth. Leroy Smith was a guy, when I got cut, he made the team on the varsity team. And he's here tonight. He's still the same 6'7" guy. He's not any bigger. His game is about the same. But he started the whole process with me because when he made the team and I didn't, I wanted to prove not just to Leroy Smith, not just to myself, but to the coach who actually picked Leroy over me. I wanted to make sure you understood you made a mistake, dude.
Now he just gave him street resilience, but Leroy may never been taught street resilience. He's never learned that skill. Everybody catch that?
And Coach Smith, the day that he was on the Sports Illustrated and he named 4 starters and he didn't name me, that burned me up. Because I thought I belonged on that Sports Illustrated. Now, he had his own vision about giving a freshman that exposure, and I totally understand that, but from a basketball sense, I deserve to be on that Sports Illustrated, and he understands that. And then you had all your media naysayers. Oh, scoring champion can't win an NBA title, or you're not as good as Magic Johnson, you're not as good as Larry Bird. You're good, but you're not as good as those guys. I had to listen to all this, and that put so much wood on that fire.
Wood on the fire.
That it kept me each and every day trying to get better as a basketball player. Now, I'm not saying they were wrong. I may have looked at them from a different perspective, but at the same time.
So what would happen if every one of your students had access to this, this street resilience? I just met a young lady on the Navajo Indian Reservation, down in the Four Corners, who's living on a dirt floor. It's red clay. She wakes up every morning, comes to school about 30 minutes late because she has to wash her feet before she goes to school. And they're like, okay, Mr. Behavioral Expert, how do we help this girl? And I sat down with her and I said, look, when I went to her house, I sat down in dirt floor. And I'm telling you, until the last couple of years, I didn't know there were people living on dirt floors in America. And I'm like, holy cow, I've flown 3 million miles. And I'm just starting to understand the real poverty in this country. And I said to her, she started talking about the anger, the rage she feels. She goes, I wish, why does my family have to live on a dirt floor? Why do I have to spend 30 minutes washing my feet? And I said, you should be angry. You should be dang angry. You have to use this anger as a reason to wake up 30 minutes earlier and wash your feet and get to school on time, turn in your homework. So I still hold her accountable. Does that make sense? But I'm trying to show her how to, you guys, I spent like an hour and a half doing this. I don't even begin to have time right now. It's real therapy. I'm just getting to the nuts and bolts of it. But everybody with me, what I tried to do with her is to show her it's okay. Imagine by third grade learning the minute you feel sad, hurt, angry, or depressed, you have the opportunity to tap into relational resilience, street resilience, and then we teach something called, you're going to have to read the book, which you have the book, so I'm not worried about skipping these other two. But if you don't have the resilience to read all the way through the book, it's not going to help you anyhow. But anyway, I'm just kidding. I always wanted to say that. But only in Utah I would say that. All right, so resource resilience is we want them to maximize their internal and external talents, abilities, resources. You know, for example, I told you guys I had 2 talents. I could talk nonstop. I could draw really good. That's my resource resilience. One time, the rent for my apartment was $300 while I was going through college. Didn't have the rent. I was about to literally go live up in a car up the Provo Canyon. One of the worst moments of my life. I run out like, Wendy, we don't have the money for rent. I told you not to marry me. And I blamed it on her, a very smart therapist. And wasn't a therapist at the time. But I just said, I told you not to marry me. Now you're about to be homeless. And I only had one talent. I could draw really good. So they're in Provo in the river bottoms of those wealthy people's homes. So I went and painted a bunch of watercolor paintings of some houses in the river bottoms. And then I would knock on the door and say, I'm a local artist in the area. I want to sell you this painting for $200. The first house I knocked on, the woman of the house came to the door, gasped at the painting, and then wrote me a check for $600 for the painting. I literally floated off the porch. So if I never get invited to speak again, I can go paint rich people's houses in the river bottoms or up on the East Bench. That makes me what? Resource resilient. Does that make sense? I'm just maximizing the talents, the abilities, the resources so I can put food in my kid's stomach. So resource resilient is the third place resilience comes from. And then the last place is rock bottom resilience. And that's when you have every reason to shut down. You're able to fight on. You have to have some hope in some unforeseen future. I had to have a belief that if I came here today, maybe we could reach more of these kids, or I have a hope when I get on an airplane in 2 days and fly across the country that some change. We have to believe hope. We have to have something to look forward to. It could be a vacation, or I had hope that I'd finish this book one day. They told me, Christian, you'll never, ever, ever be published. Less than what. I hired a lady to help me, and I never forget. She taught at UVU, and I sit down with her. She's like, I'm a professional writer, Christian. I've been writing for 30 years. You're not going to get this published. Less than 1% of books are published on a national level. We applied to one publisher. The first publisher published us because they took it home, Greenleaf, they took the book home, read the book, and they said if one person says no, they don't publish it. And they give it to like their staff. And they all said, holy cow, I needed to know exactly how to flip the switch, how to tap into my relational resilience, that street resilience, that resource, that rock bottom resilience. And the book became nationally published. And so you have to believe in the impossible. You have to believe in the unforeseen when you're in the lowest place in this world. And it's not easy. And that's one of the goals, is to show them how to be able to take the worst moment of their life. If I was your therapist, I'd figure out what the worst moment of your life was, and I would show you it's either going to chew you up, spit you out, and eat you for dinner for the rest of your life, or it's going to become the greatest resource in your life. No one has ever showed me what plan C is. It's either your best friend or your worst enemy. I've never learned plan C when we have a major challenge or crisis or opposition in our life. And when you're in this rock bottom moment, the ability to say to yourself, how can I use this pain? How do I use the fact that I failed Math 110 3 times, but I kept pushing through, and I never did pass Math 110. They told me I had to take 2 social work research methods class, and that was my Math 110 requirement. And does that make sense? I was able to get through, but I failed Math 110 3 times. Does that make sense? I kept just pushing through. What causes us to not shut down? And again, we can teach those skills in 2018. In the 1992 Olympics, I'm going to end with this, a guy named Derek Redmond comes in last place. The winner of this race, very, very few people remember, but millions and millions of people know who Derek Redmond is. And by the way, real quick, in the book, you have 27 strategies on how to develop your relational resilience, your street resilience, your resource, your rock bottom. I'm just giving you a Reader's Digest version. Does that make sense? So you have 27 strategies. The book is for you guys, and then we have a curricula for the kids. That means for the students to learn these resilience skills. So because if you don't see your problem as your best friend, we cannot teach this resilience to these students. So in 1992 Olympics, and pretty much everybody has seen this video, but not through the lens maybe of resilience. You're going to see his relational resilience is going to show up. He tears his hamstring almost off the bone. Like 90% of people would not get up and walk after that. And You're going to see his relational resilience show up, his street resilience. They're going to ask him to get off the track because he's cutting into Olympic commercial time. And trust me, I'm like 6 minutes over on the speech right now, so I'm doing street resilience right this second. I'm not following rules, and you never mind. And so you're going to tap into the street resilience. You're going to watch for that. It's going to be very obvious. And this is his rock bottom moment. And for him to get to the Olympics, he had to maximize his resources, his physical body, his talents, his abilities. So look for all 4 sources of resilience. And then I want you to ask yourselves, what would happen if every student you work with, before they ever set foot on a college campus, they know exactly where the inner motivation comes from to turn in that homework, to make better decisions, to push through the professor who they feel like doesn't like them, or the college they don't get accepted to, or whatever. Does that make sense to whatever the crisis is?
When you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need, when you feel so tired but you can't sleep, stuck in rivers, and the tears come streaming down your face, when you lose something you can't replace, when you love someone but it goes to waste, could it be worse? Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try and fix you. High up above or down below, when you're too loved to let it go. But if you never try, you'll never know. Just watch it burn. Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones. I will try and fix you.
That's street resilience. I'm going to shut that off a little bit because of time, a little short. But the winner of that race, very, very few people remember. But millions and millions of people know who Derek Redmond is because resilience transcends success. It's a much higher principle to teach a child how to be resilient. And they're much more likely to have success over the lifespan if they have the tools to get through those lows. They know exactly where that relational resilience comes from, that street resilience, that resource, that rock bottom, and most important, when those negative emotions show up, which they will always show up when you have a crisis, you have something to bounce back from, the ability to use those negative emotions as a fuel source gives you a massive advantage. Very few people know exactly how to access those negative emotions. And we're excited. I think one of the biggest social justice issues in the next 30 years is going to be millions and millions of students are going to get access to evidence-based resilience, and millions of kids are not. I'm in this room because I got access to those 4 sources. My story is not special. We have to make sure every child, if I got access to that information, every child in the state of Utah needs access to know exactly what to do when that opposition shows up, where that inner motivation comes from. And it's already within them. Resilience is in with all of us. It's our responsibility as adults is to show these students where that inner motivation is coming from within. Thank you for your time.
Okay, I know some of you.
Are you getting started?
I know some of you are taking off because we've got both concurrent enrollment instructors. We invited our student affairs group to come as well to hear what Christian had to say. So what do you think? Can we do that for our students? Can we help them build resilience? I think concurrent enrollment is such a powerful tool to help this to happen, to help build resilience in students, to help teach them how to navigate the challenges of higher education that they're going to face whenever they move over here. So hopefully what Christian has shared will benefit you as you take this back into your classrooms throughout this year. So I'd encourage you to read Christian's book and see and think about how you can apply that in the lives of your students as they come to you with different challenges. As you see them struggle in your classrooms, how can you help them to develop resilience? And maybe talk to some of your fellow teachers and see what kind of ideas they have for how you can help them build resilience. Let's give Christian one more round of applause. Okay, so we're going to, now I'm going to go over a couple of changes that we have coming down the pipe for concurrent enrollment that hopefully, we've announced some changes in the past and they've been a little bit scary sometimes. We're hoping that these changes are going to become powerful tools for you and a way to enhance what you're doing as concurrent enrollment instructors. All right, so the first thing that I wanted to bring up is that this year we are doing a reset of the concurrent enrollment new teacher training. So this is our reset year. We've done lots of new teacher trainings in the past, but we've had so many changes over the last 3 or 4 years that we figure, it's probably time that we make sure that everybody has access to the information about what we've made available out there for concurrent enrollment instructors. So we're asking all teachers this year, whether you're new or whether you've been around for a long time, whether you've attended some of these trainings in the past or not, to go through and watch this training. It's about, I think it's like 2 hours and 15 minutes, the video. And then there's a worksheet that we have you do just so that we can make sure you watch the video. And then we will pay you $75 for watching that training and participating in that training. There's a question right back here. That's right. The end of last year, we sent out an email. So many of you have already completed that, but there are several that have not. Let me show you where you access that. So if you go to the concurrent enrollment website, and then you click on, down at the very bottom, you scroll to the bottom of the landing page, there's a CE Instructors link. Click on that, and then over here on the left-hand navigation, you'll see Teacher Event Recordings. That's where this recording of this event will show up, but it's also where you access the new new concurrent enrollment instructor training. At the bottom of that video, there's a download worksheet, download the stipend form to get paid, and download the checklist. Let's see, where did I put that? This is basically everything that you need to do as a concurrent enrollment instructor. So let me just review the first week or two. Just, since we are like a week before classes for some of you it's like a week or 2 weeks out. So 1 week before class, submit your syllabus through your MyCE account. So you'll log into your MyCE account and you'll upload your syllabus to your classes. That way the liaison can look at it and see whether or not everything's addressed. If not, then they'll reach out to you and say, oh, hey, did you realize there's this other objective we need to cover, or were you planning on this, and have a conversation. You'll want to check your contact information in MyCE. Update that with your, the best phone number, email address, and home address. We like to have your home address on file for events like this, because we know that you're probably not thinking about the teacher event through the summer. I mean, you're out having fun and enjoying life, or working your second or third job, to support your teacher hobby. So we'll send out printed invitations to those of you we have an address on file for. So update your contact information, and then enter your class periods. So in each class, as you click into each class, you can enter the class period you teach. We know you're teaching a section, but we have no idea when that is or which period it is, and that becomes useful for the liaison to be able to coordinate and collaborate with you to come out and visit your class. So those are the three big things that you can do right now. If you can't access your MyCE account, call our office. The information is on the concurrent enrollment website. There's a contact us link right there on the main landing page, slcc.edu/concurrent enrollment. So reach out to us and we'll make sure you're set up and ready to go on that. So download this information, check things off as you go each semester, and you should be golden. Oh, one other thing that I want to say too, this is just a side note from Christian's talk, is that over on the table, for those of you who didn't get a copy of the book, we have extra copies of the book. So if you didn't pick that up, you can grab that. You can also get, there's like a one-page sheet on resilience that he has that kind of goes over some of the basic concepts he's talked about. And then a couple of other things too before I move on, because some of you weren't here when we announced this at first. So there's a copy of the agenda, which is also a certificate. So for those of you who want to count this towards teacher hours and you need some kind of documentation, just grab this, put your name in it, and it says that we certifies that you attended this event for 2 hours. So grab that. Also, other resources that are available are the teachers frequently asked questions, and then the stipend form. Make sure you get that before you leave so that we can get you paid for attending this event. Okay, there's the checklist. Let's talk now about improved liaison support system. So this is one of the major changes that we have made over the last year and that we're now fully implementing this year. So we have been thinking a lot. Over the last 2 years, we've come up with some goals, and one of those is to nurture the foundational elements of our program. One of those elements of our program is concurrent enrollment instructors, one of the most major components of the program. That, as we look at it, in some ways, that has gone slightly neglected over the last year. In some ways not, and in some ways it has. So we decided to look at that and figure out how can we strengthen the relationship that we have with instructors and give them the access to resources and support that they need. Another thing that happened too is over the last few years we've been contemplating what is the value of concurrent enrollment. Is it, a lot of people say, or the old paradigm is, concurrent enrollment is about save time, save money. So that means the more classes I take, the more concurrent classes I take, the more time I save and the more money I save, right? So I just should hoard as many classes as I possibly can. Well, that has all kinds of issues associated with it. So we asked then, what is the value of concurrent enrollment? Well, the value is that, one, it teaches them college content and gives them credit. But second, there's this hidden gem of concurrent enrollment in that it teaches kids how to navigate the college experience so that it develops in them resilience and persistence when they come over to Salt Lake Community College or the University of Utah or Harvard or wherever they go. One of the things, let's see. So as we thought about this idea that concurrent enrollment helps kids to develop resilience, we decided that's a major part of the concurrent enrollment experience. not just the content, but there's something else to it. There's something else to the college experience. We've realized that, here at Salt Lake Community College, we don't have a problem recruiting students into the college. We have a steady flow of students. We have a really hard time keeping them here because they hit that first challenge, they fall on their face, and they're like, I'm done, I can't handle this, I don't fit in, so I'm out of here. That's why last year we brought to you the Melinda Karp research and shared with you some of that information. It's in the new teacher training. But we decided that we need to evolve our liaison model to address the two critical parts of concurrent enrollment. One, college content, that they're getting the right content and prepared for the next course in the sequence. And two, that the experience in the classroom isn't just a hard high school experience, it's a college experience. So some of the challenges we also addressed as we're trying to figure out, how do we evolve this liaison model to create something better, is we realized there were some challenges out there. Let me know if this resonates with any of you. I have never or rarely seen my liaison. Anybody fall in that category? Some of you do, and some of you may not be raising your hands. Some of you got full-time liaisons, our 4 full-time liaisons, and they are phenomenal, and they're there as a great resource. But others haven't seen a liaison since you've taught and have little or no support. The evaluation that my liaison does isn't helpful. Who does that resonate with? So that form they fill out in MIC, it's got 4 questions: professional development, classroom management, that sort of thing. The evaluation isn't helpful. We've heard from a lot of you through the climate survey that we did and other reaching out and having conversations that the evaluation really isn't that fantastic. And the last is that when I need help, I have a hard time finding it. How many feel that? When I hit a barrier, I hit a struggle, I have a hard time finding the resources and the support that I need. So with those challenges in mind, we decided that we need to accomplish 2 things. One, we need to build a better working relationship with our high school teachers so that they're able to access the support they need when they need it. 2, we need to strengthen the college experience in the high school classroom so that we can ramp up the number of students transitioning to college and persisting to the completion of a degree. We must accomplish those 2 things. So how are we going to do that? One thing that I want to clarify before we jump into the structure of this is this statement. So I want to make clear that college faculty are not better than high school faculty. They are not better. There are good teachers, there are struggling teachers at both the high school and the college. No one is better than anyone else. And that's never been our intention with our liaison model, to make you feel like the college, the holier than thou college faculty is coming in to evaluate the lowly high school instructor. That has never been our intention. And hopefully you've never felt like that. I know some of you, though, probably have. So what is it then? So the college classroom experience, this is kind of an epiphany I had the other day, that the college classroom experience is simply different than the high school experience. And for concurrent enrollment to be successful, we have to ensure that the high school classroom experience looks as much like the college classroom experience as possible. Liaisons are not there to tell you whether you are a good or a bad teacher. We know that you guys are phenomenal teachers. They are there. The reason why they're out there in your class isn't to judge you, but it's to support you in your growth in delivering the college experience, the college content, and a stronger college experience. That is what the liaison program is about, and that's what we're moving towards, trying to make that happen. So what we've done is we've split our liaison model. In the past, you had 1 representative from the college who was your liaison. Now you're going to have 2. So you'll have an individual who oversees college content to help you develop robust content. We'll have an individual that's there to help you to strengthen the college experience, because there's a lot of questions. Well, what is the college experience? What is the difference between the college experience and the high school experience? We've created this sheet here looking at different research that sort of identifies some common themes between what is the big difference between college, and what is the difference between high school. So if you didn't get one of these, pick it up over there at the table. And if you have any suggestions or questions, then feel free to reach out to us, reach out to your liaison, and begin that discussion. So let's look at the breakdown. So the content liaison is a full-time or an adjunct faculty member here at the college. This is sort of a side job for them to go and work with you. They will be in charge of new teacher vetting with the department. So the academic department will handle the vetting of new teachers. They'll do new teacher content training. So if you need training in the specific content, they will handle that. The annual discipline-specific professional development, there are 2 hours of annual professional development that are required, and they will work with you to provide that. A yearly syllabus review, so when you upload your syllabus, they will be the person on the other end looking at that to make sure the content is solid. And then last of all is content observation visits. Now with these content observation visits, we've left it up to the academic department to determine the frequency of those visits. Some departments have said, if I can do all of this stuff, I don't feel like I need to visit them. I feel like they are competent in the content. There's no reason for me to go out in the classroom and see what they're doing because, we trust that they're able to do it. Others say, I'd like to check that first year and just kind of see how things are going. And then after that, if everything's great, I'm good for maybe 5 years or so. And then others have said, we'd still like to get out at least once a year just to see kind of how things are going. So we've left that up to the academic departments. Next is the college experience liaison. We have 4 individuals who are the college experience liaisons. They are the primary point, SLCC point of contact for all of you. So if you're thinking, 2 people, how am I going to remember who's who? Just reach out to the college experience person, and if it's a content-related question, they'll make sure you get connected to the right person to help you. Next, they handle the college experience visits and evaluation, which I'll go over in a second. And then last of all, they'll assist with general concurrent enrollment and SLCC questions. If you need help with Canvas, if you've got questions about registration, if you're wondering about your MyCE account, if you're wondering about your MySLCC account, they will be able to reach out. They'll be able to help you if you reach out to them. So here are the 4 individuals and the different categories that they will work with. So first you've got Robert Thorne, who's standing right over here. He's going to be working with STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, and related fields. So if you teach a STEM-related field, then Robert is your guy. Wade Bentley is Wade here. There's Wade. Okay. So Wade is the humanities, languages, English liaison, and these individuals also have a few little outliers where we don't have a lot, like they might oversee a welding class as well. But Wade is the humanities. Trudy, where's Trudy? You want to stand up and there we go. All right. So Trudy is our arts and CTE. So she will be overseeing all of the art courses and also things like interior design. I think you have welding and construction management and some other courses like that. So that is Trudy. And then last is David Curl right here, who will be overseeing business and social sciences and then also a few outline classes. In order to figure out who exactly your liaison is, when you go into MyCE and you look up your liaison, so there should be a button in there that says liaison, it will show you who the liaisons are that are assigned to you. You say, well, how do I know which one is my content and which one is my college experience person? Well, if it's one of these 4 individuals, that's your college experience liaison. And you are welcome. You don't always have to just reach out to your college experience liaison. If you know it's a content-related issue, reach out directly to the content specialist. Okay, let's look at the new evaluation here. So let me first show you the content observation evaluation form. Insanely simple. Basically, all it is a text field. So there's some basic information that the liaison puts in about the time they spent, and then at the very bottom is a description of the visit. So they'll come out, just check out to see what you're doing with content, and if they have an issue, they'll talk to you, or if they have any follow-up feedback, then they might edit in here and say, hey, just a reminder that you were going to add this element into the class, or that I was going to provide you more research on this. So very, very, very simple, and it's really not an evaluation or a judgment. It's just going out there, see how things are going, give you feedback, and then document it. So Now let's look at the college experience formative evaluation. So this is a formative evaluation as opposed to summative. So it's not about going there and going out and judging you, saying good, bad, you're doing a good job, you're not doing a good job, done. This is about helping you to grow. So formative goes through several parts. And in the end, if you decide after this evaluation that that was not a fair assessment of how things typically are, then you're welcome to say, I didn't feel like that went well. Can we do this again? And they'll say, absolutely. And no one will see this except for you and the liaison. And that's it. Because it's meant to help you grow, not to be, a rating on how well you do as a teacher. There are 3 parts to this. The first part asks 3 questions. What elements of a college culture have you established in your classroom thus far this semester? And how have you helped your students to see themselves as college students? So it's a reflective exercise that you will go through in a dialogue with the liaison. Second, in what ways do you intervene or coach students when you identify those who may be struggling to meet your expectations of them as a college student? That speaks to what Christian talked about today, resilience. How are you helping them to develop resilience to get through these challenges? And last of all, is there any area in which you or your students have struggled in creating or navigating the college experience this semester that you would like me to pay particular attention to during my visit and perhaps offer some feedback? That will typically happen during a phone conversation, in-person conversation, or it could happen over email if you want it to, but I think it flows a little smoother over with a phone conversation, and it'll take it won't take as much time. Liaison will type notes, and you'll move to part 2. Part 2 is the actual observation. They come out and they're going to be looking at 2 things: the college experience, and while they're out there, they'll give you some pedagogical feedback as well to help you to grow in that way. Because I know for me, back when I was teaching, it was always wonderful to have a second set of eyes come in and give me some feedback to help me to become a better teacher. I really valued that, and it helped me a lot. So that's part 2. One thing that is absolutely required in part 2 are comments. So it's not just, were you excellent, effective, minimal, or unacceptable, done. The comments are absolutely required, because without that, how do you know what you need to do to become a better teacher? So those are required. The liaison will put any suggestions they have in there to help you to get some meaningful feedback. And then the third part happens after that, where it's a brief phone conversation, or you can handle it over email or in person, however you and your liaison decide to do that. And there are 3 parts to that. First of all, it's the teacher's self-analysis. How do you think things went in the class period? So some reflective questions there. 2 questions, that's it. The liaison's observations, and then last of all, the teacher growth plan. So what are you going to work on then over the next month or semester in order to apply some of the things you learned as part of this visit? So, and then at the end, the last little part is the decision to continue with observations or approval to submit this observation as final. That's the formative part. So again, if you say, you know what, the kids were just totally on one that day, they are not usually that bad, can we redo this because I was really frustrated that day? And then they say, sure, yeah, let's go ahead and do it again, because a crappy day in the classroom isn't going to give you really good feedback about generally how things are going. Or if you had a rough night or whatever, you were up in the hospital or whatever the night before and you just weren't functioning well, you can absolutely redo that. Okay. We piloted this last semester, spring semester. And this is the feedback that we got from the teachers. First of all, they said, provide examples of what a college experience culture might look like. We developed that in this sheet, and we'll have discussions with your liaison as you work with them. Keep part 1 and part 3 of the evaluation as brief as possible, and phone conversations are preferred, is what we heard. Because we understand you are maxed out on your time, so we want this to go as smoothly and as quickly as possible. Some of the liaisons are going to be using some scheduling tools that hopefully will help to alleviate the back and forth emails. Also, the phone conversations we found go a lot quicker. So you should be able to take care of those pre and post evaluations in 5 to 10 minutes. Unless you have a lot to say and want to talk about, then it could certainly go longer. But we'd like to try to keep those two parts of the evaluation as brief as possible to respect your time. Next, encourage the liaison who's doing the evaluation to be specific on improvement recommendations and comments. So we will be sure to do that. And then last of all, a brief follow-up at the end of the semester, they said, would be helpful. So just, an email at the end and say, hey, how did you go on implementing this thing we talked about? Something brief and simpler, maybe a little survey or something. Okay, any questions before I talk about the support requests on this new liaison model, the evaluation, that sort of thing? Hopefully it will be of value to you. That's ultimately we want this to be both something that helps to strengthen the relationship with the college, add value to you and to your experience as a concurrent teacher, and to benefit ultimately your students in strengthening the college experience. Okay, let me talk about support requests now in MyCE. So we added a new feature in MyCE that the coordinators are now aware of, the coordinators in your high school are aware of, but we decided to give the teachers access to this as well. The support request basically allows you, if a student comes to you, throughout the first part of the semester when registration's going on, and they're like, I tried to register, but I can't do it. I hit an error. It won't let me do this. I tried to apply for admission, and I couldn't do it. You can go into your MyCE account, submit the support request. So just select the issue, whatever it was. If they can give you some information, then that would be helpful to say, it was a time ticket error. That's what it said. We'll put that or whatever else is listed under there. Select the student from the drop-down list. Your high school will be by default yours, and then the term. Any details you can provide us, and then submit it. Once you submit it, then you'll click on the support request and you'll see the request there in MyCE marked as pending. Once it's resolved, it will be marked as resolved. So you'll be able to see, the coordinator will be able to see, and I think we even set it up so that the student in their MyCE account can also track that to find out when it's resolved. They probably won't, because you know how students are, but at least you and the coordinator will be able to see where that is in the process. Yes?
This is set up for the scenario where a student may have taken a course, say, a year before, and then under strict policy, and I know if they're not registered for a course within a year, the registration or admission times them out, and so they're not going to actually, they may or may not even show up as a student we can select. Is their admission has timed out, they have to go through getting themselves reactivated, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Are they still going to even be available there in the drop down?
Yeah.
Could that be an option for us to be able to manually input an S number?
Yeah, you could absolutely. So the question is, if you go to select a student and the student isn't there for one reason or another, then what do? Just type their information right here and then go ahead and submit it. Preferably you would check the student, because that if the student is in the list, so check carefully to see if they they used a different last name or first name, or they've got two last names hyphenated and they're reversed or something. Check to see if that's the case. But because when you do that and you check the student, it pulls all their information. So we have their S number, we have their date of birth, we have gender, we have name, we have all of that information that makes resolving it so much easier. But if it's not in there, just enter it in the details, submit it, and we will work on getting that resolved. Now, this doesn't just go to our office. It goes to Salt Lake Community College admissions office, who handles all of the admissions registration, other issues. So we're able to collaborate as a team and get that done a lot quicker. There was a question in the back there. Yeah.
If we have like 10 students who don't have test scores, can we pull up all 10 at once, or do we have to fill out 10 separate?
You could put all 10 in at once, but I don't recommend that. It's a little more work to add each of them individually, but for tracking purposes, if you add 10, if you put all 10 listed here or up there, and I don't think you can check more than one, but if you listed 10 students here and we resolved all of them but one, then it would show as pending, even though 9 of them have been resolved. So best practice is submit each one individually. And I would encourage you to work with your coordinator and find out which of your coordinator, every high school does it differently. So sometimes the coordinator would say, no, just send them to me and I'll take care of it. Or maybe you partner a lot closer with your coordinator and they say, no, if you can do it and I'll do this, then that'd be great. Go ahead. Say that again?
Have you noticed that your accounts usually giving students their S numbers and stickers, and you don't tell them later?
No, so you're talking about students getting their S number like via email? No, they still get it through the, well, there's a couple ways that students can get their S number. One is they can wait 10 business days and they can get it in the mail. The other is if they use their social security number whenever they're filling out the admission app. And in fact, let me just show you where this is because I'm sure this is probably going to be useful for you guys. And we're at time, so I'm just about done here. Okay. Okay, so on where they go to log into their MySLCC account, if you click there to go log into MyCE, there is something called Retrieve Your Student Number. If they click on that, they can just go ahead and retrieve it right there as long as they use their social security number. If they didn't, they're out of luck. But the other thing that they can do is that the coordinator in your school has the ability to look up their S number within, I think it's like 48 hours of them applying for admission. So send them to the coordinator, they can look them up and give them their S number, and then that way they don't have to, wait 10 days. So, okay. This is where you'll view the support requests. As you can see, when you click on the list, there will be a list of all the support requests, whether it's resolved or whether it's pending. And I think that's it. I'm going to cut out the last part of what we're going to talk about today, just given time. But any final questions that you guys have about anything we've talked about or shared today or whatever? Okay. We'll have a fantastic school year. We look forward to seeing you guys as we go around in the high schools. Any questions, concerns, feel free to give us an email, give us a phone call, and we're always happy to hear from you. Thanks again, everybody, and have an awesome day.